Our next set of practice problems, we actually are doing some adding and subtracting to solve the problems. So we're looking again at some of these, how much higher, what's the difference than, change in elevation, that kind of thing. And we always really need to remember that we start with where we end and then subtract whatever it is that they're looking for. So we always start at the end, okay? So when we look at this one, how much higher is? Our end just about always uses the word is, okay? End and is. So our is right here, this is where we end, is 500. So we're going to do 500 minus 400. And of course, that's an easy one, 400 minus 500. We can stay change if we want, but it's a straight out subtraction problem. If you have 500 or something, take away 400, you're left with 100. This one's very easy, so we're left with 100 meters. Or how much higher? It's 100 meters higher. The next one, how much higher is 500 than negative 400? So we're going to use the same exact setup. So we've got 500 minus, and this time it's negative 400. I get to cha-cha-cha. So I get to stay, change, cha-cha-cha. This is fun. So 500 plus 400. Well, that's easy enough. You should know. I mean, if you get a little confused, you can look at the fact that should know what 5 plus 4 is, which is 9. So therefore, applying that, I know that 500 plus 400, of course, is 900. So, and we're looking at meters here, so the final answer is 900 meters. And again, if you think about this, you just want to put it in perspective. If this were 0, and I've got something up here, this is 500 all the way up here, and then I've got negative 400 down here, what we're looking at is the distance between the two. So the distance, again, is 900. We were doing that when we were actually using the number lines. Okay, now this one, may look a little bit more difficult because the numbers are larger. The only difference here is that we really need to look at where is the ending. What is the change in elevation from 8,500 to 3,400? So when we're looking at that, we know that our ending place is actually right here. So for this one, we're going to start at the 3,400, and then we're going to take away 8,500. So for this one, let's go ahead and do that stay, change, cha-cha-cha. So I stay, change, cha-cha-cha. Oops, that should be an 8. Stay, change, cha-cha-cha. So now this is negative 8,500. And now my signs are different. Find the difference. So that means I have the absolute value of both of these. So the absolute value of 3,400 is 3,400. The absolute value of negative 8,500 is 8,500. So I'm going to be finding the difference. That means I've got 8,500 minus 3,400. So 8,000 minus 3,000, you should know that that's 5,000. And then 500 minus 400 is 100. So I've got 5,100. I just need to make sure that I look at what's the larger absolute value. So that, of course, is here, my 8,500. So it's going to be negative. So my final answer is negative 5,100 meters. Moving right along, what's the change in elevation between 8,500 meters and negative 300 meters? Again, where are we ending? Okay, so we're again ending because it's the difference between, so this is where we're starting, we're ending over here. So when I set this up, I'm going to have negative 300 minus 8,500. And then I get to stay, change, change, cha-cha-cha. And now my signs are the same. Find the sum. So I find the absolute value of both of these. The absolute value of negative 300 is 300. The absolute value of negative 8,500 is 8,500. The signs again are the same, so I'm finding their sum. So 8,500 plus 300, well, 500 plus 300 is 800. So I know that's going to be 8,800. I look at their original signs. Both of them were the same, and they are both negative. So therefore, my answer is also negative. Negative 8,800 meters. And my last one, how much higher is negative 200 than 450? So is means that's where I'm ending. So negative 200. This one's going to look a little weird because of, we're starting and it's asking how much higher. So it looks really weird, but follow along here. How much higher is, so that's my ending, negative 200 minus 450. So I get to stay, change, change, cha-cha-cha. And now my signs are the same. Find the sum. So absolute value of both. Absolute value of negative 200 is 200. Absolute value of negative 450 is 450. Finding the sum. 200 plus 450 is, of course, 650. My original were both negative, so therefore my answer is negative 650 meters. Next, this table shows 4 transactions and the resulting account balance in a bank account. Except some numbers are missing. Okay, so I'm going to be filling in these missing numbers. So these are slightly different when I look at this because I know that for each of these, we know I went from here. Whoa, sorry about that. I went from here, from like 360, and I still had 360, nothing happened to it. Then I went from my 360, subtracted 2250, and ended up with 337.50. So for this next one, I'm going to have 337.50. Something's going to happen to it. So I'm going to say plus n, and it's going to equal 35. I'm going off the side here, sorry about that. So I know when I solve equations, I'm always going to be doing the opposite. So the opposite of 333.50 would be to subtract 337.50. Whatever I do to this side, I have to do to the other side, minus 337.50. I'm sorry, this looks so weird. So that crosses out, and I'm going to end up with n equals 182.35 minus 337.50. I really hope you're listening and not just trying to copy this, because I know that it's not very clear because I keep going off the edge here. So remember, I'm starting with something in the positive. I'm taking away more than I have, so I'm going to end up somewhere in the negative. So remember, when I put that on my number line, what ended up with, like, I'm looking at the difference here. But I can also sing my song, because I know it, that I would stay, change, change. I'd end up with two different, a positive and a negative. And I know I need to find their difference. So I'm going to end up with 337.50 minus 182.35. So I'm going to, you know, straight out a subtraction. You should know how to do this. I can't take my 5 away from 0. So I'm going to borrow from the 5. That becomes a 4. This becomes 10 minus 5 is 5. 4 minus 3 is 1. Drop down that decimal. Make sure they were stacked on top of each other to begin with. 7 minus 2 is 5. Can't take 8 away from 3, so this becomes a 2. 13 minus 8 is also 5. And 2 minus 1 is 1. And I know that this went in the negative, so this, of course, is negative 155.15. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in here, negative 155.15. So now, from my 155.15, I know that not my 155.15, sorry. I know I'm going from my 182.35, something's happening to it, and I'm going to end up at negative 41.50. So I'm going to do the same process again. I'm going to say I have 182.35. I know that something happens to it, and it ends up at negative 41.40. Right? So how do I solve this? I take away 182.35 from both sides. Both sides, these cancel. I'm left with n equals negative 41.40 minus 182.35. And then I know I get to stay, change, cha-cha-cha. And now my signs are the same, find the sum. So that means I get to come right over here and add them together. 41.40. Make sure that we stack those decimals on top of each other. Oops, sorry about that. And 182.35. I'm going to add them up. 0 plus 5 is 5. 4 plus 3 is 7. 1 plus 2 is 3. Drop that decimal down. 4 plus 8 is 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And I know that I'm going from this positive number down to this negative number. So that number is negative. So in here I'm going to end up with negative $223.75. Okay, so we have this, funny term that we're not used to seeing, this departure from the average. And they tell us, and I know that you should already have this in your terms to know, it's the difference between the actual amount, in this particular case, the actual amount of rain, and the average for a given month. So here's our historical average for Albuquerque, New Mexico for June, July, and August. And then they tell us that last June, only 0.17 inches, or 17/100 inches of rain fell all month. What is the difference between the average and the actual? So the difference between the average and the actual. So this is in June. Look here in June. Oops. In June, it was 0.67. That's what it usually is. So that's where I usually am. And it happened to only fall 0.17. So I have to find the difference. I mean, this is straight out. They're both positive. I'm subtracting. I mean, if it's, you can't see that in your head, that's okay. Let's just bring it over here to the side. Whoa, writing all sorts of crazy things. That's 7. And then we're subtracting 0.17. And When I subtract, 7 minus 7 is 0. 6 minus 1 is 5. Bring down the decimal. So the answer is 0.50, or really half of an inch. Okay, and then the next one, the departure from the average rainfall last July. So now we've like kind of doing the reverse, but we're really just adding, is negative 0.36 inches. So last July it was the average is 1.5. So I've got 1.5. I'm going to add my departure from the average because it's negative 0.36. Signs are the same. No, they're not. Signs are different. Find the difference. So I'm simply going to subtract here. 1.5 minus 0.36. Notice I put that 0 in there as a placeholder. And then I say to myself, can I take 6 away from 0? No, I cannot. I need to borrow from this 5. It becomes a 4. The 0 that becomes 10 minus 6 is 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. Drop down my decimal. 1 minus 0 is 1. My final answer here for this one is 1.14, or 1 and 14 hundredths inches.